So the last major category I'm going to talk about for board reading is something I'm calling predicting an ending. This is, from what I've seen, the kind of a popular teaching method. It's the one that I think is pushed on the coaching channel of the Discord. And prior to that, I've seen it since I began playing. It's something that has been used for a while. As the name would suggest, you're going to predict how the game's going to end. And more generally, you're working backwards from what you think will happen. So you look at the board, and from looking at the board, you predict how is this game going to end. Which points are important to get, which piles are likely to empty. Does that mean it's going to be emptying on provinces? Does that mean it's going to be empty or ending on a 3 pile? Which of these things is happening? And then once you figure that out, you're then building your deck to maximize chances of winning with that ending. So like a 3 pile, you're going to add more gains. Provinces, you're going to focus more on coin payload or being able to gain provinces somehow. Your mid game is when you're adding those things to the deck that'll make you better at ending the game. So it's either those more gains or things that'll get you provinces, and then the early game is making that mid game possible. So you go from the end and you move back, and then you move back to where you are at the start. It takes a little bit more involvement than some of the others. These last two, which were key cards and start, it was just, well, here's your deck. But this is really looking forward and doing a lot more thinking about how the game's going to go. Advantages, optimizing the deck for the ending that actually happens can be a huge advantage. Like, if you think it's going to 3 pile and you get more gains, you are so better set than somebody who gets fewer. Unlike these other methods, which kind of tell you how to build the deck, this actually gives you a game plan, start to finish. And it's going to raise your awareness of pile out and province out threats, because you start at the game, you're going, these are the things that are going to pile, these are the things that I'm really watching. Concerns with it? Opponents might not do what you think they do. A lot of the time when you're predicting an ending, you're assuming an opponent is going to try to do about the same thing that you are. So, like, if one notable example I can remember was, it was this deck, that I was playing against Dan Brooks, and, he built this deck which was really good at playing a lot of Ironworks, and so it was going to pile out. And then I bought a province, and, he couldn't score. And so you kind of lose a bit of flexibility potentially. It can be overwhelming. We talked about, this is a full start to finish game plan, but that's a whole lot to think about at the start and can be completely overwhelming to actually go through. And then lastly is it kind of leaves questions of how as an exercise. You want to get towards this finish, and in the mid game you're going to add things that seek that finish, and in the early game you're going to go things that seek that mid game, and it's all kind of, you're supposed to just naturally know how to do this. There's some more explanation in articles about it, but I think it really boils down to, you have to have some deck intuition. So going to the boards. This is our base only board. Our endgame prediction is that it's going to likely be a 3 pile. Festival is the only village, so it's pretty likely to run out. That's what only villages usually do. And then the presence of Witch and no sort of defense means that curses are probably going to run out. Other possible piles are going to be Vassal, which, we've talked about some, but it's something that can really be splashed into this deck a lot and gives coins. And then also Estate is always a possibility when there's lots of gains floating around, like with Festival. Important for this predicted end. So this is like, what are you trying to do as a result of making this prediction? You think it's going to be a 3 pile, so pile control is really important. If you have more festivals and more artisans than your opponent, you're going to be more set to empty piles. So trying to get those are really important. The first two piles with festivals and curses, they're expected to go quickly. So you want to be pretty wary of points because, once those two go out, Vassal's probably getting low. Estate's always a possibility. You have to be really aware of where points are standing and make sure that you don't end up, not scoring when you really needed to. So that's what you kind of get out of there. Deck-wise, you're adding festivals, you're adding artisans. Level 4 board. Endgame prediction. Provinces. Here, only stables are super likely to run. They're the non-terminal draw. You're going to get a lot of it then. If a lot of markets are gained, that's also possible. You're going through and just your price points work out such that you're hitting 5 and stables are out and you don't really want to add silver. You might be adding a lot of markets, and at that point you're getting all these gains floating around. So cheap piles like Haven and Estate it's possible that they'll run. Important for the province predicted end. When you're thinking provinces, you're really thinking, how am I gaining provinces? How am I gaining multiple provinces? Whatever. So you have a natural 3 buys per turn from your wharves. And so the important money thresholds to build to are like 16. That's how you're going to get 2 provinces or province and 2 gardens, so on. And then there's also this 20 or 21 where you can get 2 provinces and then an extra green card. So that's really where you're looking at building up to achieve this province ending. Moving on to our level 7 board. Endgame. You're expecting provinces. We've talked about how this board is on the weaker end, and so of the things here, really only Fool's Gold would be expected to pile. It's hard to produce large amounts of money with buys like we saw on the last board, so it's probably only going to be single provinces. At some deck quality expense, you can additionally get Alliance. That'll be an extra point boost over somebody who's just doing provinces. And that means that for our predicted end, we want to be able to hit 10. So we want more Fool's Golds than the opponent, because that'll make, more than collide. You put 3 Fool's Golds together, that's 9, then you just need a copper. And then you're also going to want to add one of these draw cards, Library or Rabble, because that's also going to be something that's going to, get you to that where you have 3 Fool's Golds in the same hand. And then with these single provinced games, it's really important to watch the province parity. If you're second player, you don't want to get behind if your opponent starts, or if you're first player and your opponent starts before you, you want to make sure that, you're not going to put yourself into a situation where if they buy a province, you can't buy a province or you're probably going to lose. So that's where some mix of alliances, which score a bit more, versus province, which scores a bit less but doesn't ruin the deck, can be something that is really important to make a trade-off. And then our last board, level 10. Endgame. This is probably going to be a 3 pile. Realistically, Ghost Town is something that tends to pile just naturally on more buildy boards, and then Sheepdog's also going to be likely to pile because you'll remember from the component analysis, you can see going back to these, that it's something that you can really just splash into the deck a lot of and it'll help. University and Merchant Guild are also going to be heavily gained. University, it's always a little bit surprising when a potion card piles, just because usually you're not going to have 2 potions, and so it's easier to play around it. But Merchant Guild, can be expecting to get, 3, 4 of those. So it's going to be, if both players do that, it's going to be down to 1 or 2 Merchant Guilds in the pile, and then it's not too much to just go past that. Merchant Guild coffer accumulation is going to make provinces possible. So in addition to, watching all this 3-pile stuff, you also have to be taking into account, is your opponent or are you going to be able to score enough? Important for this predicted end, university gains expensive actions. That makes those piles easier to empty, so you're going to want universities. And then canal's also going to make things easier to pile because the plus buy, or makes everything cheaper, and so plus buy is going to be more meaningful. Short term in the deck, you're going to want university, you're going to want merchant guild to get to the 3-pile. How do you get there? Well, you have to get potion, you have to get university. This becomes kind of, in the other 3 methods, we kind of talked a little bit more about thinning on this board, and that's where I think you can kind of get lost in everything you're trying to do for that ending, and you kind of become overwhelmed with that and neglect the short term. This is definitely not my favorite method, although I did put it last. But I think there's some things to draw out of it that are valuable, get more gainers, really look towards the end of the game and make a game plan for that. Although for me, I usually find that comes more in the mid game than the start. So there's kind of your board analysis through predicting an ending, and I hope it did some amount of good.